Do you remember when children's TV felt like the beating heart of Britain? The days when Grange Hill, Biker Grove and Heartbeat gave us faces we thought we'd never forget. Those stars were part of our living rooms, shaping our afternoons and Sunday nights, only to vanish when the cameras stopped rolling. Some walked away from fame by choice, others simply drifted into quieter lives and normal professions. One of them went from being a celebrated actor to a bus driver. Keep watching to find out who. And before we dive in, which child star do you think met the most tragic end? Let me know in the comments below. 1. Trisha Penrose. 17 years on ITV's Heartbeat made Trisha Penrose a familiar face to millions. As Gina Ward, she ran the Aidensfield Arms, poured pints and became the centerpiece of countless storylines. She wasn't just a background character, she carried the warmth of the show, year after year, through changing casts and shifting plots. But once Heartbeat ended, Penrose turned away from acting. She reinvented herself as a businesswoman, becoming director of Adlington Memorial Park, the country's largest natural burial ground. Away from the camera, she raised a family and poured energy into causes close to her. For those who remember Sunday nights in front of their telly, her absence is felt most in the gap it left in British drama itself. Next, we have another fan favourite who left our screens and became a doctor. 2. Mark Lester. For millions, Mark Lester will always be Oliver Twist. In Lionel Bart's 1968 musical, the moment he timidly asked,
"Please, sir, I want some more,"
he became the face of British cinema's golden era. That role carried him to global fame, his fragile innocence resonating with audiences from London to Hollywood. He went on to star in Run Wild, Run Free and the Tender School Romance Melody, cementing his status as Britain's go-to child actor. But by 19, Lester had had enough. He stepped away completely, became an osteopath, and built a respected practice in Cheltenham. Patients included athletes and public figures, though Lester never sought the limelight again. He chose the quiet dignity of a life outside film. Lester is a reminder of the simpler world of British cinema that feels further away with every year, but the next name took that same fame into the heart of Britain's living rooms. 3. Todd Carty. In Grange Hill, no one made a bigger mark than Tucker Jenkins. Todd Carty played him from the school's early days in 1978 through the spin-off series Tucker's Luck, a character so enduring that whole classrooms knew his cheeky grin and rebel streak. He was the kid every pupil either wanted to be or wanted to know, and for many, Tucker defined what Grange Hill was about. Carty successfully bridged the gap from child to adult actor, later appearing in EastEnders as Mark Fowler, another role etched into soap history. But over time, the screen grew quieter. He dabbled in directing, did theatre, and even showed up in reality TV, but never reclaimed the dominance of his youth. Today he lives a far more private life, occasionally popping up in nostalgic interviews. His story is a reminder of the bygone days of British TV. But another child star from the same era learned that one role can define you forever. 4. Danny Harmer. For anyone who grew up with CBBC in the 2000s, Danny Harmer was the story of Tracy Beaker. Loud, bold, and endlessly mischievous, she became the face of a generation's after-school viewing. British kids copied her attitude, her comebacks, even the way she stormed out of rooms. The role followed her through sequels and spin-offs, but as adulthood arrived, Harmer's star began to dim. She trained as a drama teacher, opened a performing arts academy in Berkshire, and later appeared in Strictly Come Dancing, though never with the same cultural weight. Motherhood now takes center stage in her life, and her acting appearances have been rare. For audiences, she will always be Tracy, and that's both a blessing and a cage. The glorious world that gathered round CBBC After School has gone, leaving her lodged in our memories forever. But long before CBBC, another actress captured hearts in a very different Yorkshire village. 5. Nick Berry. Back in 1985, EastEnders introduced viewers to Simon Wixie Wix, a leather-jacketed charmer played by Nick Berry. He wasn't just another soap character, he was Albert Square's first true heartthrob, caught up in love triangles and family dramas that glued millions to their screens. For a time, he was both soap royalty and a pop idol, the kind of dual fame we rarely see anymore. By the early 1990s, Berry reinvented himself yet again, this time as PC Nick Rowan in ITV's Heartbeat. Sunday evenings belonged to his calm presence patrolling the moors, and the series became one of Britain's most watched dramas. Then, almost suddenly, Berry walked away. He formed his own production company, dabbled in behind-the-scenes work, and eventually retired altogether to Essex, where he now lives quietly with his wife and sons. His retreat from fame was graceful, almost old-fashioned, a reminder of when stars could simply fade into private life. And before him came another boy who defined innocence on screen. 6. Peter Duncan. Peter Duncan's name will always be linked to Blue Peter. Joining in 1980, he quickly earned a reputation as the show's daredevil, abseiling, climbing, and throwing himself into challenges that kept young viewers hooked. But unlike many presenters, Duncan didn't vanish overnight. After leaving, he took a different path. Acting, directing, and even becoming Chief Scout of the UK, a role that made him a leader for thousands of young people. Now he occasionally reappears in documentaries or nostalgic specials, but he's far removed from the bustling BBC studio of 80s TV. But for our next star, fame began not in the studio but in the classrooms of Grange Hill. 7. Lee MacDonald. As Zamo Maguire in Grange Hill, Lee MacDonald carried one of British TV's most powerful storylines. His descent into heroin addiction in the 1980s gripped the nation, sparking the Just Say No anti-drugs campaign that even took the cast to the White House. For many schoolchildren, Zamo's struggle was the first time television felt real, urgent, and frightening, but the fame didn't last. After leaving the series, MacDonald struggled to find work as an actor. He retrained as a locksmith and now runs his own shop in South London, occasionally appearing in small guest roles or reunion documentaries. To fans of Grange Hill, though, he'll always be Zamo, the boy who made children's television feel like life itself. And while his battles were scripted, another young actor from the same show faced a very different path. 8. Michelle Gale. In the late 1980s, Michelle Gale lit up Grange Hill as Fiona Wilson before moving into EastEnders, where she played Hattie Tavernier. She was one of the first black actresses to take on a regular role in the soap, and for a while it seemed her career would stretch endlessly ahead. But Gale's biggest fame came not from acting, but from music. She became a Top of the Pops regular, a pop star with credibility. Yet by the early 2000s, she stepped away from the limelight. Gale married, had children, and dedicated herself to writing, even penning children's books and a novel about teen life. Her life today is quieter, though she occasionally resurfaces on nostalgic TV or stage appearances. Our next star also turned away from that era's spotlight to build an entirely new career. 9. David Lonsdale. David Lonsdale became a household name through his role as David Stockwell in ITV's Heartbeat. Introduced in the early 1990s, he was the comic relief, a lovable handyman who always found himself in muddles. Audiences adored him, the bumbling smile, the warm accent, the familiarity of a character who was dependable in a series full of drama. He stayed until the show's final year in 2010, making him one of its longest-serving cast members. When Heartbeat ended, Lonsdale didn't pursue stardom with the same hunger. He instead shifted to local life, presenting a Sunday radio program called the Southport Arts Show. He also dabbled in small roles across British television, from Emmerdale to Vera, but his fame never returned to its 90s peak. But years earlier, another young actor had already chosen to vanish from fame altogether. 10. Jack Ryder. Back in the late 90s, Jack Ryder became a household name almost overnight as Jamie Mitchell in EastEnders. He was the young heartthrob of Albert Square, tangled in doomed romances and dramatic storylines that made him one of the most popular soap stars of his era. Viewers were stunned when his character was killed off in 2002 in one of the soap's most emotional exits. But instead of chasing more acting fame, Ryder turned his back on the spotlight. He moved behind the camera, carving out a new life as a writer and director for stage productions and television projects. His later appearances were low-key and rare, and for many, he seemed to vanish after leaving the square. Next, another soap starlet faded away after their glory days on British TV. 11. Lucy Benjamin. Lucy Benjamin was another EastEnders star who captured public attention. As Lisa Fowler, she became central to some of the soap's most dramatic storylines, including the infamous Who Shot Phil saga that dominated TV in the early 2000s. For a while, she was everywhere, her face splashed across magazines and tabloids. But once her time in Albert Square ended, Benjamin's profile faded quickly. She appeared sporadically in reality shows and guest roles in dramas, but nothing matched the heights of her EastEnders fame. Today, she lives a quieter life, focusing on family and avoiding the constant glare of fame that defined her younger years. For fans who remember her tense showdowns in the square, her absence from primetime British TV feels absolutely striking. Next up is a child actor who came from cinema instead. 12. Thomas Turgoose. Thomas Turgoose's rise was nothing short of extraordinary. At just 13, he became the face of Shane Meadows' This Is England in 2006, a film that tore through British cinema with its raw portrayal of working-class youth in Thatcher's Britain. Turgoose's performance as Sean was so authentic that it turned him into one of the most talked-about child actors in the UK. He carried the role through several TV spin-offs, showing range and depth far beyond his years. But as he grew older, the spotlight dimmed. Roles trickled in, but Turgoose never chased mainstream fame. Instead, he chose a quieter, more grounded life, appearing occasionally but never with the same cultural force. For many who remember This Is England shaking the nation, his reduced presence is a reminder of how quickly the industry moves on. The next familiar face came from a children's studio that defined the 80s. 13. Sarah Greene. In the 1980s, Sarah Greene was one of the defining faces of Blue Peter. Bright, enthusiastic, and endlessly adventurous, she embodied the spirit of children's television at a time when the show still commanded millions of viewers. Greene was the presenter who seemed fearless, tackling challenges and keeping kids glued to the screen. But after leaving Blue Peter, her career trajectory was unpredictable. She appeared on other shows, dabbled in presenting, but then slowly faded from the limelight. Greene chose instead to build a quieter life, often working in media behind the scenes or retreating into private ventures. For those who grew up with her cheerful presence, her absence in British TV leaves a gap that later generations never quite filled. After Greene's exit, another child performer took a different path through music and film. 14. Andrew Hayden Smith. Andrew Hayden Smith rose to fame in Byker Grove as Ben Carter, the Newcastle-based teen drama that gave us Ant and Dec. He later became a CBBC presenter, stepping into the studio world where his bright personality carried him further. A short stint on Blue Peter and a cameo in Doctor Who showed his range, but the next big break never quite arrived. Instead, he pivoted into a quieter role within television, becoming a continuity announcer for ITV. Millions still hear his voice introducing shows each evening, though they may not connect it to the face they once watched growing up. Hayden Smith's transition highlights the way children's TV stars often remain in the industry, but out of view, their energy absorbed behind the camera rather than in front of it. And long before him, another child actor from the 60s walked away from his career entirely. 15. Jack Wilde. Jack Wilde was just 16 when he charmed audiences as the artful Dodger in Oliver. His cheeky grin and streetwise swagger won him an Academy Award nomination and propelled him into international stardom. Hollywood embraced him in H.R. Pufnstuf, a psychedelic children's show, but his fame dimmed quickly. Wilde struggled with alcoholism, a battle that consumed much of his adult life. He eventually left acting behind, working in small theatre productions before focusing on survival rather than celebrity. Though he made a few appearances in later years, he died in 2006 at just 53. His tale shows the darker side of child stardom in Britain, the intensity of fame with little safety net when it fades. And decades later, another CBBC star would quietly choose an entirely different path. 16. Kim Tzerkezier. On Balamory, Kim Tzerkezia brought warmth and intelligence to Penny Pocket, the shopkeeper with a gift for numbers. The show was a cornerstone of early 2000s children's TV, and her character was beloved for her cheerfulness and relatability. But Tzerkezia's story after television is perhaps even more remarkable. Living with a neuromuscular disorder, she transitioned into advocacy and creativity, founding her own production company, Scattered Pictures. More recently, she retrained and qualified as an integrative psychotherapeutic counselor, dedicating her career to supporting others. And while Tzerkezia built a new life through helping others, another household name retreated simply into his own. 17. Matthew Waterhouse. Matthew Waterhouse made television history when he joined Doctor Who in 1980 as Adric, a teenage companion to the 4th and 5th Doctors. At just 18, he was the youngest actor to ever hold such a role, and his performance remains one of the most controversial in the show's history. Adored by some, criticised by others. When Adric's story ended with a dramatic death in 1982, Waterhouse's career largely faded with it. He worked sporadically in theatre and audio dramas, but mainstream television never came calling again. Instead, he pursued writing, penning novels and memoirs that offered his perspective on fame and the Doctor Who years. Today, he lives quietly in Connecticut, far removed from the fandom that once embraced him. Next up is another young actor faced a similar vanishing act. 18. Patsy Kensit. Few British child stars balance both acting and music like Patsy Kensit. She first appeared in commercials at the age of 4 and acted in films such as For the Love of Ada before becoming a familiar face on TV. But her childhood fame peaked when she fronted the pop group Eighth Wonder in the 1980s, giving her a dual life as both actress and singer. For a while, Kensit seemed unstoppable, even appearing alongside David Bowie in Absolute Beginners. Yet the glare of fame proved difficult to sustain. As the years rolled on, Kensit withdrew more and more from acting, appearing in occasional soaps or reality TV, but never reclaiming her early dominance. Her retreat into quieter living closes the circle of so many child stars who once defined Britain's screens. Next up, a child icon who went from being an actor to a bus driver. 19. Rod Christensen. American-born but forever tied to British childhoods, Rod Christensen became beloved as Spencer the Painter on Balamory. Every child knew his cheerful art lessons and the bright overalls that made him stand out on screen. When the show ended in 2005, Christensen chose a path few expected. He became a bus driver for Stagecoach in Scotland. For years, passengers were stunned to find Spencer behind the wheel, and many still recognised him instantly. He admitted he'd happily return if Balamory was ever revived, showing his affection for the role. His story is a reminder of how stars of children's TV often lived far simpler lives than their characters. And while Christensen drove buses, another star from the same era chose the kitchen instead. 20. Zoe Salmon Corrie. Crowned Miss Northern Ireland in 1999, Zoe Salmon brought glamour and warmth to Blue Peter when she joined as a presenter in 2004. Her blonde hair and sparkling personality divided opinion at first, but she soon won viewers over, becoming one of the show's most recognizable faces of the 2000s. After leaving in 2008, she dabbled in Dancing on Ice and occasional presenting gigs, but soon shifted focus to her personal life. Zoe married, had a son, and began working in her family's bakery in Belfast, a far cry from her golden era on British TV. In fact, she briefly returned to the headlines in 2024 when Queen Camilla visited the bakery. Eventually, she slowly retreated from the spotlight and found fulfillment in ordinary, everyday work. Which of these stars were your crush as a child? Let us know in the comments below. If you learned something new today, make sure to give the channel a subscribe. See you in the next one.